A very good morning to you. How are you doing? I hope that you are well. Welcome back again. Welcome again to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Lilian Thomas, and it is a wonderful Friday morning. Quite chilly. We are in County 034 right here at Kitengela, and it is quite chilly today. Actually, when I woke up in the morning, it was raining from wherever I was coming from. And you see, it kind of impacts on how the day flows. You find everything is so slow, jam and everything, but we are here today and the show is starting just about now. If you are watching us for the first time, kindly follow us on our social media pages. On Facebook, we are at Our Farmers. On YouTube, we are at Our Farmers Media. Make sure you follow our page. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. And you can as well hit the notification bell. Every time we go live, like right now, or anytime we upload a video, you are the first person to know, like you have first hand information. It will be a very good thing. Also, because there might be people who might be needing this information out here, how about you help us share the link? Share it with your friends, any farmer you know, anyone in the agriculture industry, your family members, your colleagues. It will do us a great deal. And we will really appreciate if you do that. So the week has come to an end. This week we've been having very interesting discussions, and we are going to be having another discussion today. And today we will be talking about diseases in tomato farming. So earlier this week we started our discussions from disasters in agriculture. On Tuesday we got into crop production. On Wednesday we started on tomato farming. So Wednesday we did basically on the foundations, the production in tomato farming. And then yesterday, we covered the pests in tomato farming. So today, we will be getting into diseases in tomato farming, and we will do a little bit of them, and then we will finish up on Monday. So it's going to be a very awesome discussion. And I said I'll be answering your questions today. Any questions that you have regarding to every topic that we've talked about since the week started, and that is specifically for the morning show, the breakfast show only. I'll be answering any questions regarding to that. We are going to be having a great discussion. If you have any questions related to diseases in tomato farming, or you have any information related to diseases in tomato farming, you can send me your messages, write your comments on our comment section on Facebook at Our Farmers, and I'll be sampling that in the second part of the show and the third part of the show. Just keep the conversation going as well. Tell me where you're watching the show from. I want to know where you're watching the show from. What has really interested you in the discussions we've had this week? What have you come to learn? What did you learn during the week from the discussions we had? I'd really love to know. Really want to know how informative the discussions are being to you. You can as well tell us in our comment section at Our Farmers on Facebook, and I'll be reading them as we progress with the show. Okay? It is Friday. Friday, right here on the Breakfast Show. It is usually Gratitude Friday. So every Friday, I get to tell you what I have been grateful for during the week. And I'll be doing that just in a few. I'll be telling you what I've been grateful for during this week. But you can as well tell me what are you most grateful for during this week. And also, I want to make this discussion very interesting. You can as well tell me what exactly have you learned this week, more of apart from the discussions you've had. I really want to know more of the life lessons you've learned this week. I have a very interesting life lesson this week. I have a very interesting gratitude this week to be telling you. But before we start, as we always say, this is the positive vibes auntie, and I always start with a quote of the day. You need to start your day on a very good note, so I'll be doing that for you. Our quote today says, try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. Try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. We'll be looking into that at the end of the show, but just have it in mind. Try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. And I'll tell you why I chose that as the quote of the day. I have a very interesting thing to it. So I'll be telling you that when we come to the end of the show, as I'll be telling you my gratitude for this week. But you can keep telling me that on my comment section. I'll sample all your feedback as the show progresses and towards the end of the show. I want us to get into our discussion. But first, again, COVID is around. If you're getting out of the house, put on your mask, let it cover your mouth and your nose. Wash your hands regularly, sanitize if you can, and as well, maintain social distance. Wherever you're seated, if you are in a public place, if you are in a matatu, maintain social distance. Very important. And if you are working from home, you have nothing very important to be doing outside, kindly stay indoors. Okay? So it's going to be an interesting discussion. I want you to join me for this discussion. And you can keep giving me your comments. Again, tell me where you're watching the show from. Tell me something about tomato farming. Today we are looking at things concerning diseases in tomato farming. Tell me something about diseases in tomato farming. And as well, ask questions regarding to all the topics we've discussed on the breakfast show this week. And then we can just look at that as we finish the show. Yes, we'll do that. On Wednesday, yeah, today's Friday. So on Wednesday, we discussed about tomato farming. We looked at the production of tomato farming. It's more of a recap. So we gave you the conditions that are needed for growing tomatoes. And we said we love well drained soils. We like temperatures between 21 to 24. That is appropriate. Moderate rainfall. And then went into the nursery bed preparation, and we went into the transplanting part of it, and we looked at the management part of it from support, weeding, fertilization, application. We looked at all that on Wednesday. So if you missed it, you missed the show. Kindly, it is the weekend. I know we don't really put up something for you to watch on the weekend. You can as well go back and watch the shows that you missed right here at our farmers, okay? So that is what we did on Wednesday. Yesterday, we looked at the pests that affect tomato farming. And we discussed several of them. We looked at white flies, we looked at cutworms, we looked at aphids. We discussed several pests related to tomato farming. And as well, we also even had images for you concerning the pests. So today we are getting into diseases in tomato farming. I will introduce you again to the Plantix app. So the Plantix app is an app that you can download on Google Play Store. Install it on your phone because I know you're watching me online. So I assume you have an Android phone. Download the app on Google Play Store, install it on your phone, and then you log in into your app. Whenever you are in the field, the Plantix app actually helps you get to identify and recognize pests and diseases in your farm. So if you find something peculiar in your farm in regard to pests or diseases, you find that your plant is looking not the usual, not the normal that you're used to, and you think there's a problem with it. So you just log in into your app, take a photo of that certain plant part, take a photo of it. The app will scan for you the photo. It will diagnose the pest and the disease affecting your crop. And it also gives you the preventive measures and the control measures. How wonderful is that? That's a hack for you. It is a hack for you, especially if you really don't have the information about pests and diseases. And sometimes you get stranded in your farm and maybe you can't get consultation services easily. You can as well start learning these things. Logging into your Plantix app, walk around your farm, try to learn to use it. You can tell me about your experience as we will be wrapping up this discussion about tomato farming on Monday. Okay, so that is it about the introduction part. So I want to get into the diseases we will be looking at. So today we will be covering something about damping off. We will be looking at early blight. We will also be looking at tomato spotted wilt virus. We'll be looking at bacterial spot and speck, and then we'll be looking at fusarium wilt. We'll be looking at bacterial wilt. We'll see how far we go, and then we'll finish the rest of them on Monday because I think it's just normal and it's very wise for me if I give you something that you can really digest, something that you can really consume, instead of me bombarding with you with so much information that really won't make sense. So we will be doing like 5 of the diseases and then we'll be finishing them up on Monday. So it has been a very long discussion about tomato farming. It is quite a lengthy topic. So I just want to make sure I've covered almost everything that you need. Yes. Um, tomatoes have a process in which they grow. So we will be looking at first what kind of diseases you get when you are in the seedling stage. You see, like when you transplant, after you've raised your seeds in a nursery bed and the plant has sprouted up. So that's why we are going to be starting our discussion about diseases in tomato farming. So we start from the seedling stage as we get into the vegetative stage. But most of the diseases found in vegetative stage are as well found in the fruiting stage. So that one will just combine it. We'll just be looking at them in general. But in this first stage, which is the seedling stage, our first disease is dumping off. And my director Sarah will be putting up an image about of how the disease looks like. So I hope you get to see that on your screen. She'll be putting up an image about dumping off. So I hope you get to see that on your screen. So we're going to start on dumping off. I don't know what you understand by dumping off. Is it something you are familiar with or not? So dumping off is a disease that affects tomatoes while in the seedling stage. So it happens in such a way that sometimes when you plant your seeds, when you have put them in the nursery bed, instead of your seeds growing, they tend to rot while still in the soil. And then they become, you see the way you have seeds. I told you the tomato seeds are really small, this tiny, this tiny. So the moment you put them in the soil, instead of them growing, they rot and then they soak in too much water. So they soak in too much water and then they rot. And when it affects them in the seedling stage, you find when you look at your tomato plant, this assume this is a tomato plant. So I'll be using illustrations here. I don't know how effective that is, but assume this is your tomato plant, and then this is the base of the stem, and then you have the roots inside the soil. When you look at your tomato plant, if it is affected or infected by dumping off, you find that actually at the base, these lower parts of the stem, you find that it is quite dark. It is quite dark. And that's how dumping off actually affects your tomato plants. And it is very common, especially right now during this rainy season, it tends to be quite common. Also, when the weather is quite warm. So here's a hack. You remember when I told you on Wednesday, tomatoes actually thrive better in well drained soils. So this is what happens when you have soils that are actually waterlogged. When your soils are waterlogged, the seeds rot and then you develop now the dumping of disease. You find these dark systems around the seedling stem. That's why we always advocate make sure that the drainage in your farm is very good. And then you remember the thing I told you about spacing. And I told you when you're spacing your tomatoes, we use a spacing of 45 centimeters between the plants and 60 centimeters between the rows. Okay? The spacing has to be right. If the spacing is not right, so in terms of you have your plants very close together, like so close, they tend to have poor drainage and then they tend to be affected by dumping off. So, how do you control this disease while still in your farm? How do you get to control this disease while still in your farm? Sometimes the seed rots. The seeds rotting, they can be, it's that maybe the seeds weren't in very good condition by the time you were using them. So the first step is start by using certified seeds. By using certified seeds, I mean, can you buy your seeds from a shop, like an agrovet shop, seeds that are certified, like we have seeds in our agrovets. We have this particular behavior, especially African farmers. We find we like we actually use seeds from previous harvests. We try to produce our own seeds. Sometimes they are not very clean, sometimes they are not very healthy. The first step is to use certified seeds. And because I said this disease affects the crop while it is in the seedling stage, so most probably while it is in the nursery, when you are planting, when you are making your nursery bed, make sure you raise it. Raise your nursery bed to ensure that drainage is appropriate. So raise your nursery bed, it will come in handy. It will ensure you have proper drainage. So you'll have less occurrences of the disease. Yeah, most probably will actually get rid of the disease. You won't have the disease in your farm. And then the thing about spacing, I have told you it is very common in places where the spacing isn't right. Have the right spacing in your farm. If you forget everything else, kindly remember that. Have the right spacing in your farm. 45 centimeters by 60 centimeters. And I mean 45 centimeters between your plants and 60 centimeters between your rows. Waterlogging is a problem that you really have to improve the drainage in your farm. And also for people who use irrigation method, it is actually wise that when you are irrigating your crops, kindly irrigate your crops early in the morning. We keep saying that over and over again. Irrigate your crops in the morning such that your soil, the plant gets to absorb the water during the day, and that soil actually dries up kidogo. It doesn't become so waterlogged. You want to prevent the disease by all means. And also when you're walking into your farm and you find that a certain crop in your farm has been affected by this disease, we always say just uproot that certain crop. If it is like you have 3 crops in a row, just get rid of all the crops. Get rid of all the crops and make sure you destroy them. You don't leave them in your farm because it can spread. Don't leave them in your farm. Destroy, get rid of them from your farm. Every time we say about uprooting a diseased crop or a crop infected by pests, kindly never ever leave them in your farm. If you do, there's a higher chance of the pest or the disease moving from that crop to the other healthy crops. So it's only wise that you actually get rid of them, like completely. Just remove them from your farm. They don't belong there. That's not their space. That is not where they should be. Get rid of them completely. And cleanliness is a very good thing. And you find that you can actually spread this disease using your farm tools. If this plant is infected and I come and use my farm tools on this plant and I go and use it on the next healthy plant, I will transfer the disease from the infected plant to the other plant. So, meaning you will be spreading the disease all over your farm if you're not careful, if you are not maintaining hygiene in your farm. So, it is very important that you are always disinfecting your farm tools and equipment. Make sure you are always disinfecting your farm tools and equipment every time you are done from the field. It's like rules you have to do. You see the way you cook, you eat. At the moment you're done eating, you have to wash the dishes. Same thing, same rule applies here. You use your instruments, you use your equipment, you use your tools. Once you are done, before taking them back to the store, before storing them again, kindly disinfect your tools. You don't want to transfer the disease from one part of the farm to the other part of the farm. So disinfect all your tools whenever you are in your farm. Whenever you come from your farm, make sure you are disinfecting all your tools. I told you something about that was our discussion on Wednesday. I told you that the tomato plant is actually part of a family called Solanaceae family. You don't really have to master that, honestly. You don't. Mm-mm. You don't. Although what might be too hard for you, it is okay. You don't have to master that. But you can actually master this. In the Solanaceae family, we have certain crops in that family. And these crops are crops like tomatoes, potatoes, we have eggplant. I don't know how you call it in your language or commonly locally how you call it. It is either called an eggplant or brinjals, I think, something of the sort. I'm not sure. I'm used to calling it as an eggplant. And we also have the nightshade. The nightshade is in Kenya, we actually refer to it commonly as managu. People in the coast region call it mnavu. I have forgotten what the Luo people call it, but that's the name it goes by. Any other African person, you know it as African nightshade or the black nightshade, okay? These crops are in the same family. These crops tend to be affected by the same pests and diseases. So whenever you are planting any crop, now if I am going to plant tomatoes, it is wise that I don't plant it somewhere where another crop of this same family was planted. It is okay for us to. It is actually recommended that we should practice crop rotation. And when you are practicing crop rotation, you never grow two crops of the same family in the same area, like successively, like zikifuatana, more of one after the other. You don't do that. I can't grow potatoes after tomatoes. No, you can't. It is illegal. Actually, it is illegal. There's a likelihood of you having diseases in your potatoes if they were in the tomatoes when you were growing them initially. And in order for us to actually break the disease cycle, the pest cycle, we actually practice crop rotation. And on Wednesday, I actually told you crop rotation, especially for things like the Solanaceae family, you can actually always crop rotate them with the plants in the Brassica family. You don't really have to master also that word Brassica if it is hard for you, but plants in the Brassica family include, you can master these: kales, spinach, cabbages. Those are the Brassicas. You can actually rotate them with the Brassicas. You can rotate them with cereals, maize, wheat, sorghum. Those are cereals. Or rather, you can rotate them with legumes. Use the legumes that we are always using, especially as cover crops in our soil. So we have beans, we have groundnuts, we have pigeon peas. All these are legumes. You can actually rotate them in your farm to help break the cycle of this disease. So crop rotation is very important, especially if you are dealing with crops in the Solanaceae family. It is very important. So more specifically, I've said tomatoes, potatoes, brinjals, eggplants. Those are the crops we have in the Solanaceae family, and the African nightshade. Ama watu wangu wa nyumbani, managu. That is what we call it. So I will just use a more common word that you guys understand. So that is it about damping off, and it actually happens in the seedling stage. So that is the major particular disease we have in the seedling stage. So I don't know if Sarah put up the image and you've been able to identify what it really looks like. I think Sarah, you can put it up one last time before we get into the next disease. So kindly please do. They can just have a look, understand it as we get into the next disease. But keep sending me your feedback. Keep sending me your comments. Tell me where you're watching the show from. If you have any questions, you can tell me. If you think there is some information you have that I might have failed to mention, kindly comment on our comment section. We really appreciate that. So I think Sarah just put that up. So we will be getting into the next stage. And I told you in this next stage, we have diseases that work all around. So they are seen in the vegetative stage, they are seen in the fruiting stage. So I won't really break them down, like separate them. I'll just be looking at the most common diseases you might be having just after we move from the seedling stage. So I will start with a very very common disease that people battle with, most so right here in the tropics. Africa, most of the areas we have in Africa are in the tropics, most are in the tropics, and that is early blight. I don't know what you know about early blight. What information do you have? If you are a tomato farmer, has it ever affected your crops? And what was it like? How did you actually identify it? I would really like to know. How did you identify the disease in your farm? But I've given you a hack as we were starting. Plantix app. I'll just be doing a review of that as we end the show so that you don't forget. During the weekend, you can have something to be trying. So during the weekend, you can experiment with the Plantix app and see how it works and what it will do for you. So early blight. Early blight is a fungal infection. It is a show we were supposed to be doing. I don't think we've done it yet. It is a fungal infections, and most of the fungal infections we have most so in our horticultural crops are usually spread during this rainy season. Reason being, most of the fungal infections, as they develop, they are dispersed by the droplets of rain and water, most of them. So you find them to be very rampant, especially during the rainy season. Early blight is the same. It is one of these fungal infections, and it actually appears. It is more rampant after we've had a session of really heavy rainfalls. So if you are in a place, because I know right now in Africa we have the long rains, but if you are in a place where you are having extremely heavy rainfall, you tend to receive extremely heavy rainfall. And let's say you are growing the field varieties, okay? You grow the open field varieties in your farm, you are most likely, if you don't choose resistant varieties, your plants might actually be infected by early blight. And as I said, it is spread after a long session of heavy rainfall. So actually the wet conditions help them in reproducing. They help them in reproducing. So I'll give you basic science that I don't really need you to master that. It doesn't matter. But I'll just give you the logic for you to understand. So fungi reproduce by having some things called spores. And you find in wet conditions, the production of the spores is at its maximum. They increase. And these spores, when they land on your vegetables, they grow and they cause fungal infections. Okay? So you find during wet conditions, when you have extreme wet conditions, the spores multiply a lot. They are produced a lot. And remember what I said. The spores, they are very tiny, they are very light. So they are spread by diseases, by wind. Wind always carries them around. Also, as I mentioned when we started talking about early blight, the splashing rain. The splashing rain, if the rain hits, you see the impact it hits with the leaf, it actually disperses some of the spores. Have you ever seen a scenario whereby, have you tried pouring water with high pressure on the ground? It actually disperses the soil particles. The same thing happens with this disease. The rain falls with too much impact on the leaf surface, it disperses the spores. So they get to spread to other plants. It is also common, especially when you use overhead irrigation. Now you understand why we always advocate for people to use drip irrigation, like right there at the base of the crop. That is more appropriate. The moment you're using overhead irrigation and your water is splashing on the leaves, you get to disperse these spores from one plant to another. And if you have warm temperatures, my dear, this disease will multiply in your farm like nobody's business. Kabisa. So this is how you identify it. My director is putting up again. Yes, Sarah, please kindly put up an image of what the disease looks like so that these people can really understand what we are talking about. They are that they don't remain in the darkness. So it always have like it causes dark spots on the leaves, and these dark spots have some yellow part in it. They have some yellow part in it. And then after a while, you actually realize whenever they are in your leaves start drying. They just dry and then they fall. They just dry and fall off. They just dry and fall off. And if it falls on you, because I told you it operates in two ways, in the vegetative stage and also in the fruiting stage. So in the fruiting stage, it affects the fruits, and the fruits actually start to rot. They rot and then they just drop. Everything drops in this disease. The moment it has infected either your leaves or your leaves dry out and they drop. Your fruits, on the other hand, they rot and they drop. How do you? How do you then control this particular disease? I always say first things first. I will keep emphasizing about this. I think you just get tired of listening to me talk about the same thing over and over again, but because it is important and I think you should know, I will just say it. Make sure you are using certified seeds. Certified seeds, most of them are pathogen free, like they don't have diseases. They are clean, certified seeds. Make sure you are using certified seeds to grow your tomatoes. But also, we actually have varieties that are resistant to this disease, and I really like the work that our breeders have been doing. They really try and come up with plants and varieties that are resistant to certain pests, certain diseases. They actually make our production easier. So use resistant varieties. If you are right here in Kenya, I know one variety that is actually resistant, which is the Rio Grande variety. The Rio Grande variety is actually has a resistance to the early blight disease. If you can find the Rio Grande variety, good, perfect. You make your work easier. Your plant will never be infected by this disease. Okay, so use resistant varieties. You can tell me, you can actually write it on our comment section. What kind of varieties do you have in your country? Because we always have people watching from Zambia. I don't know if Gil is watching today. We have people from Nigeria and Malawi. So I don't know what kind of varieties you have in your country that are resistant to this disease. You might actually write them on our comment section. Someone might come across them and they needed the information, help someone get the information. But for people in Kenya, you can always use the Rio Grande variety. The Rio Grande variety is actually resistant to this disease. If you have a crop that has been infected by this disease, in order to actually curb the spread of the disease, it is very wise that you destroy this crop. Destroy it, and I said again, don't let it remain in your farm. Just make sure it is not in your farm any longer. And then you remember the way I've told you about the way the impact of the rainfall hits the leaf and then it disperses the spores into another crop and continues spreading the infection. If you have crops that are this closely spaced, you find the spread is so easy because the spores don't really even have to go a long distance before landing on another leaf surface. So the right spacing is important. Again, I think I will repeat this too much. You will end up knowing the right spacing. The right spacing of a tomato plant is 45 centimeters by 60 centimeters. Yes, just have that in mind. 45 centimeters by 60 centimeters. So just make sure you are using the right spacing. And I told you, this disease actually spreads by splash of rainfall or if you are using overhead irrigation. If you can, kindly don't use overhead irrigation. Don't use overhead irrigation. we always advocate overhead irrigation actually tends to spread most of the pests and diseases we have in our crops. Use drip irrigation. Drip irrigation is more focused on a certain part of the plant. Like it's focused on the stem, like the root part of the plant. There's no way you'll be able to spread the pests and diseases you have in your farm when you're using drip irrigation. So avoid as much as you can overhead irrigation. And also, you see, because in the wet season, this disease tends to spread a lot from one point to another. If you need to do any management in your field, don't do it after the rains. Like when your field is still wet, don't, because you might be the carrier of that disease from one plant to the other plant. You go around spreading the disease in your whole farm. So don't work in when the field is actually wet. Just let it dry out, and then you can do your management that you need to be doing in your farm. So today we are discussing about diseases in tomato farming. So Sarah will still be having that image right there on the screen about early blight disease. Today we've been talking about the diseases we have in tomato farming. Yesterday we covered something on the pests we have in tomato farming. And the previous day before yesterday, that was on Wednesday, we looked at something on tomato farming. So, more of the production part of it and the management part of it. As we go on a break, we will be coming back and we'll be looking at tomato spotted wilt virus. We'll look at fusarium wilt, we'll look at bacterial speck and spot. We have these diseases that we need to cover. But kindly keep sending me your feedback. On our Facebook page, we are at Farmers. On YouTube, we are at Farmers Media. You can write your comments on my comment section on Facebook. Tell me where you're watching the show from. How fantastic is your Friday? How has your week been? And I asked you something. What are you grateful for this week? I really want to know. Motha Mohammed, are you watching the show? What are you grateful for this week? Collins Kulei, some of you, I know you by name, so I might mention your names. I really want to know what you're grateful for this week. And I'd also like to know what has been your biggest lesson this week. You know, we live life generally. We really need to know this other side of life apart from what we are actually doing about agriculture. What are you grateful for this week? And also, what is the biggest lesson you've learned this week? I'll be telling you that on Friday. Don't forget, it is Gratitude Friday right here on the Breakfast Show. We'll be taking a short break just to pay a little bills, but we are coming back in a few. Just don't go anywhere. Just stay right here. I'll be back in like 2-3 minutes. Yes, we're taking a short break. We'll be right back. A very good morning to you. I hope you have a wonderful morning. This is the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Lillian Thomas. How are you doing? How has your week been? I really want to know, how has your week been? My week has been fantastic. We've been having really great discussions right here on the Breakfast Show since Monday, and we are wrapping up our breakfast shows for this week today, and then we'll be doing this again on Monday. Fun facts. This is we are starting the third week with me being here as your breakfast show host, and it has been a very interesting discussion. Anyway, that will be coming later on at the end of the show. Today, we've been talking about diseases in tomato farming, and we've started by looking at some of the diseases. We've looked at dumping off, and we've covered early blight. So we'll be covering two more diseases on this part of the show, and then we'll be looking at another disease on the last part of the show. Later on Monday, we'll be finishing up on some of the diseases on this breakfast show again on Monday. Sawa sawa? This week we've had very interesting discussions. So we did something on disasters in agriculture on Monday. On Tuesday, we looked at something in relation to crop production. On Wednesday, we started off on tomato farming. So we looked at the production management and everything about tomato farming. So yesterday, we were getting into more details about the pests we have in tomato farming. And today, we've started on the diseases we have in tomato farming, which we'll be doing today and next week. And you don't want to miss something about that show we'll be having on Monday. So next Monday we will be wrapping up on these diseases in tomato farming. And then we'll be looking into details about a certain pest and disease that has affected most of tomato farmers right now in Africa, Musu, the tutor absoluta. I have some really good information that you might find helpful that we'll be covering on Monday. So make sure you're staying here for the breakfast shows. I always have awesome content for you people. I do this for you. So if you are watching the show for the first time, kindly subscribe to our pages on YouTube. We are at Farmers Media. Subscribe to our page. By the way, you guys are not good people. On a very honest note. So on YouTube, we have less than 100 subscribers. Akina mmejaa Facebook. Muko wengi by the way. Can we just go just to have a look on our YouTube page at our Farmers Media. Subscribe to imagine you're just hitting that red button, yeah, subscribe. If to, you just press it and you're good to go. Just subscribe to our page, and you can as well hit the notification bell every time we go live. You are updated every time we upload a video. You are on the know. We would like you to be on the know about everything we do right here at our Farmers, the home of African farmers, where we help you attain knowledge and grow your profits. I told you today is, as usual, on Fridays on the breakfast show, it is Gratitude Friday. So if you have something you're grateful for, you can as well tell me on my comment section. I'll be sampling that in a few. And I also asked something else. What is the biggest lesson you've taken this week from your week? What is the biggest lesson you've had? I'll be sharing with you my lesson, and I'll be telling you what I'm grateful for as we wrap up the show. So make sure you're staying tuned for that. Before we get back into our discussion, maybe let me just sample and see if there's someone who sent me feedback. I want to read your feedback and see what you say. Okay, so I have some feedback. That's what I'll be reading right now. I have one, Harriet Idena. Harriet Idena says, "Hello, good morning. Good morning to you, Harriet. How are you doing? I hope you have a fantastic morning. My morning right here is fantastic. I hope you are well." Harriet, thank you. I think this is the second time I am seeing you commenting on our page, and we are glad that you are actually loving our shows and you are coming back here to watch our shows every morning. I have Isaac Nonde. Isaac Nonde says He is watching us from Lusaka, Zambia. Hi Isaac, how are you doing? How is the South of Africa doing? How is Zambia doing? Zambians are great farmers, really great farmers. They are doing this thing so well. And should I say, is it even right for me to say this? That we have a very big fan base in Zambia. We have a lot of our supporters from Zambia. So tunashukuru. We love you people from Zambia. Thank you so much. We like the fact that you keep supporting us. I know someone else who keeps commenting on my page from Zambia, Gil Zambika. I don't know if you're watching the show today, but yes, I know someone else from Zambia, Gil Zambika, but I've not seen him today on my comment section. But nonetheless, it is okay. Thank you so much for watching the show, and we hope you're finding the information to be quite educative. And then I have Mother Mohammed. This is our good friend. Mother Mohammed says, "Good morning from Mombasa County. How are you doing in County 001?" Mother Mohammed, good morning to you. We will be sharing something about Mother Mohammed a little bit next week, doing some great work in the agriculture industry. And we actually love the fact that he's always watching our shows and he supports whatever we are doing. We'll just be telling you what development he's been doing in the agriculture industry sometime next week. We have great people, by the way, watching the show. So it is a plus plus. If you still want to send me your feedback, kindly do so on our page on Facebook. We are at Farmers. On YouTube, we are at Farmers Media. And then I'll be looking at your feedback again after we come up from the other break. No, before we go on another break. So you can as well just get interactive with me. Tell me, what have you been grateful for this week? Where are you watching the show from? What is your biggest lesson from this week? And also, if you have anything you feel like telling me about diseases in tomatoes, you can as well let me know. If you had any questions you would have liked to ask, just write them on our comment section and I'll be looking at them. You see, I've looked at your comments, I'll be looking at your questions, and we'll try as much as possible to answer you. And the questions are very specific in regarding to the topics I've covered on the breakfast show. So we are very specific. It's everything about the breakfast show. So just let me know about whatever we discussed on Monday. On Monday, we had a discussion about disasters in agriculture. On Tuesday, we did basic about crop for production. On Wednesday, I did something for you. That's where we started tomato farming. So we did the basics of tomato farming. Yesterday, we looked at the pests in tomato farming. Today, we are looking at the diseases in tomato farming. So just let me know if you have any questions, write them on my comment section. But before I get back into my discussion, let me just wrap up with the comments I have here. I have another one comment coming in from Robert Osoro. Robert Osoro is a good friend of mine. How are you, engineer? How are you doing? Thank you for watching the show. He says, "Good morning, a good presentation." Thank you. Thank you so much, Robert, for watching our show. You can as well help by sharing the link. Okay? Thank you. So tell me what you guys are grateful for. Where are you watching the show from? What is your biggest lesson this week? If you don't have any information about diseases in tomato farming, you can still write your comments and give me your comments about the things I've mentioned. Where you're watching the show from, what you're grateful for, and what is your biggest lesson of this week? Na kuna watu sijaona, by the way. Collins Kulei, Gil Zambika. I don't know where you people went to today. Tony Hillary, sijui mmeenda wapi, by the way. I am not seeing you on my page, not at all. But if you are watching, so you just say hello. Yes, that will do us some good. So before we went on the break, we discussed about the diseases that affect tomatoes while still in the seedling stage. And we covered dumping off and we gave you the measures that you can take, okay? To, and then we went into the next stage. So I said for the vegetative stage, the fruiting stage, I'm not really going to split them. I'll just do it generally. And before we went on the break, we looked at early blight as a disease in tomato farming. And right now, I want to talk about tomato spotted wilt virus. in tomatoes. Okay, that is what we'll be looking at right now. So, have you heard of the tomato spotted wilt virus? Yes? No? Do you remember what we talked about yesterday about the pests and diseases that affect our tomatoes? We talked about aphids, cutworms, whiteflies, thrips. We looked at several actually pests that affect our tomatoes. Now you remember something we said about the thrips. Okay, you don't? Make sure you go back and revisit the show I did yesterday on the pests and diseases, on the pests affecting actually tomato farming. So the tomato spotted wilt virus is actually caused by these certain pests. It is caused by the thrips. The thrips actually cause tomato spotted wilt virus. My director Sarah will be putting up that for you. I really like what my director does. She's always on the move, trying to make sure that you have all the information that you have. So, everything that you are seeing in terms of the graphics, I have my director Sarah and our graphics person, Dennis, working on them, and they are doing a really great job. I am really glad that they are doing that. So, the tomato spotted wilt virus is spread by thrips and it mostly affects crops in the Solanaceae family. Again, you don't really have to master the word Solanaceae if it is so hard for you, but just remember the crops we have in this particular family. And they are the tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, and the African nightshade, and the bell pepper. Bell pepper, sweet pepper, green pepper, yellow pepper, red pepper, whatever you call it. In Kenya, we commonly refer to it as pili pili hoho. Yes, they are in the same family, and all these crops tend to be affected by thrips as a pest, and so they are at a very higher chance of getting the tomato spotted wilt virus. When these pests, I told you, the thrips actually they suck sap on the leaves. They just more like the aphids, they suck the sap and then they exude some substance. Okay, when they do, your leaves tend to have dark brown spots. Your leaves, you find your leaf surface has dark brown spots and then they become larger. Kidogo kidogo too, as the days go by, they actually enlarge in size. After a while, you realize your crop is actually having stunted growth. What do I mean by stunted growth? By stunted growth, your crop is not growing as it usually should be. So maybe you expect your crop to be at, this is a very random example, that's not a fact. So you expect your crop to be at around 50 centimeters at 4 to 5 weeks. But you find at 45 weeks, your crop is still at around 25 centimeters. That is what we mean by stunted growth. It kind of slows down the growth process. It doesn't happen as it usually should be happening. This disease can affect the crop either in the vegetative stage. So, the vegetative stage, we are talking about the leaves and everything. And then we have the fruiting stage when you start having the tomato fruits on your crop. It can actually also affect your tomatoes in the fruiting stage. And in the fruiting stage, it's actually more of, you see, on when we have tomato fruits, the immature tomato fruits are usually green, if I'm not wrong. They are green. You find you have a green shade, but you find another lighter shade of the green. So you find like it forms green rings on your tomato fruit, which are lighter than what your tomato looks like. They are actually lighter. I really couldn't find a tomato in our farm that really has it. I would have shown you that. But if I do, I'll just be posting that on our page at our farmers. Yes. So you can just be looking at our page. You might find some goody things over there you can check out. And then that's what happens when it affects the immature fruit. So like the green fruit, it causes some a lighter shade of a lighter green. So it forms rings of a lighter green in your immature fruit. But in your mature fruit, the mature fruit now you find it has started changing color. It is orange to red. That is when the mature fruit starts looking like when it's ripe, orange to red. In this mature fruit, it actually causes brown rings. So for the immature fruit, it causes green rings, lighter green rings. For the ripe fruits, it causes brown rings and spots. And you know the way we always talk about quality of the fruit, how the fruit should be looking like, especially if you're doing things for the export market, there's a certain appearance you should be having. You find when you have these spots, these rings on your fruits, it actually hinders with the quality and it causes fruit deformation. So most probably, what your produce can't be sold as well as it should be. But you can always control this disease. And I will remind you again from yesterday, I've been talking about pests. Today I'm talking about diseases. And there's one thing I've been very clear about. When I talk about the control measures, I am talking about organic control measures. So for the chemicals, I won't be telling you much of the chemicals you can apply or the chemicals you can be spraying. I am just giving you the more of the organic control and preventive measures that you can use. We always say you use chemicals when you think, when you actually realize the distraction you have in your farm is way too much, you will lose too much, and you can't really control them with these other methods. That's when you resort to chemical control. If you missed that, I did a show on integrated pest management. You can always find it on our page. Just go back and I'll have a look at what I had to say and what we covered. Maybe you will learn a thing or two. Okay? Pardon. The control measures. As always, I told you our breeders are doing a very good job. Right here in Kenya, our breeders are majorly at the Kenya Agricultural, Livestock and Research Organization. Yes. I know one breeder. I had a breeder for a lecturer in campus. Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I did. Professor Dida from Maseno University. And he worked on maize. I remember something about Professor Dida, and he worked on maize. He taught me plant biotechnology as a unit in campus. So yes, I know a breeder, but the breeders are doing a really good job. And the breeders keep coming up the moment they find our crops are being affected by certain diseases, certain pests, they try to find the solutions for us. And for this particular disease that we are talking about, tomato spotted wilt virus, we actually have resistant varieties that have been developed. Right here in Kenya, you can use the variety by the name star 9006 or star 9008. Those are the varieties that I know that are resistant to this disease. So if you know you kind of tend to get a lot of thrips in your farm and you are at a very high risk of actually your crops getting this disease, you can actually just plant a variety that is resistant to it. So you can use the star 9006 or star 9008 variety. It will make your work way too easier and a little bit way too better. And we actually want that. We want much productivity. So, if possible, use a resistant variety. And for this particular disease, use the star 9006 or star 9008. When we were talking about thrips yesterday, we said you can control them by using sticky traps to trap them. Yes, sticky traps helps in catching thrips. Just set them in your farm in very specific points and you will help to control the thrips you have in your farm that can actually cause this disease. Again, back to what we've been saying since we started this. If you find a crop in your farm that is infected, get rid of the crop from your farm. Destroy it. Destroy it completely. If possible, burn it. Just don't let it linger in your farm, remain there. It will always spread from one point to another. So we don't do that here, okay? You destroy it completely and get rid of it from your farm. And yesterday, I think I mentioned something about you find whenever you have a lot of weeds in your farm, these weeds kind of tend to give the pests a place to stay. So you find a lot of thrips will just be harbored by the weeds we have in our farm. So, if possible, if you can you just have a weed free farm? I told you when we started on the crop production about tomato farming. Tomatoes are very susceptible to very many pests and very many diseases. I actually think it is one of the most difficult crops for farmers to grow, especially if they are not careful. You can just always make 100% loss. If you are not careful with whatever you're doing, oh yeah, you just have no harvest. It's not happening. So it is very important that you actually have a very clean farm. So control your weeds. Make sure that the sanitation in your farm is actually very high. It should be very high. High sanitation in your farm. Make sure you have no weeds in your farm at all. At all. Like you don't have a leeway about it. Just make sure you have no weeds at all in your farm. Should I repeat again something about spacing? I have said that over and over again. Spacing has to be right always. Spacing 45 by 60 centimeters. Sawa sawa? Yes, that is it about the tomato spotted wilt virus. I know Sarah put up an image for you, and I think you've been able to identify what this particular disease looks like. So we'll be getting into our next disease. And you know, the most interesting part about this, you find that most of these diseases are actually caused by the pests we were talking about yesterday. So it's not like it's something new, unaskia. Mm-mm. We're not telling you something new. It is something we told you yesterday. You know these particular pests ndio zinatuletea hizi shida zote. I just wanted to confirm if there's someone who's asked a question such that we know we need to be answering someone. Tusiache mtu kwa mata. And maybe someone had a question. You know, it is not good when we do that to people who are watching our shows and are really supporting us right here. So, I don't really have another question right here, but if you have questions, keep sending them on my page. We are at Our Farmers on Facebook, on YouTube. We are at Our Farmers Media. You can always write your comments and your questions on our page, and then we'll be looking at them when we come back from the other break. So we'll just get back into our discussion wherever we were because there are no more questions or comments on my comment section. And so we've covered dumping off, we've looked at early blight, we've looked at the tomato spotted wilt virus. Now we are getting into the tomato yellow leaf curl virus. Oh my god, that word is pretty long. It is pretty long, like very long. Tomato yellow leaf curl virus. If you paid attention, you heard me mention, I just mentioned the disease when we were talking about one of our pests. One of the pests we discussed yesterday. One of the pests we discussed yesterday was white flies. You remember us showing you the image of the two small white insects on top of your leaf? Yes, those are the white flies. The white flies actually cause the tomato yellow leaf curl virus. And if you were careful on the image we showed you, you find these white flies mostly they eat the leaf surface. They are actually mostly, if you are pest scouting in your farm and you really want to identify, you have to turn your leaf. Like you look at the underside of the leaf. That's where you find them mostly, on the underside part of the leaf. The tomato yellow leaf curl virus is spread by whiteflies that are usually and majorly distributed on the underside part of the leaf, and that's actually where they feed from. And funny thing, they really like young plants. They don't like very old plants. They like young plants. And I'll tell you the very bad part about this disease. This disease can spread in a maximum actually, of 24 hours. Like in 24 hours, boom. If you have dry conditions around and the temperatures are really high, you're done. The thrips are very active. I think I mentioned that. Their production rate is usually very high, especially in high temperatures, and they are very active in high temperatures. So the disease can actually spread, boom, in a span, like 24 hours. You have it in your farm. So good, so well, infested the whole farm. And what are you supposed to be doing? What are you supposed to be doing? What does it actually do to your plants? Just as the name suggests, it is tomato yellow leaf curl virus. It makes your leaves to turn yellow and they actually curl. A tomato leaf, if you haven't seen one, it is usually green. So the moment you have a yellow tomato leaf, there is a problem. Your tomato leaf could be infected. Your tomato plant could be infected. Tomato leaves are usually green. They are not supposed to be yellow. This particular pest actually, when it infects the crop, it makes the leaves to turn yellow. They turn yellow and they color. They color. You see a leaf surface is supposed to be like this flat, and then you find it kind of shapes up in a jikunja. That is what I'd call it in Kiswahili. For people who understand Kiswahili, it curls like in a jikunja. Do you see the way we say about curly hair? Yes, something about curly hair. It is something to ina curl pahali. It is not as straight or a flat surface as it should be. And if your leaf curls, remember something I told you about the leaf actually is the medium we use in order to have photosynthesis taking place. Photosynthesis is the action of making food by the plant, okay? Photosynthesis helps in fruit formation, fruit development, the plant development, all these stages. And then you have your leaves curling. One, your leaves are curling. Two, your leaves are yellow. Photosynthesis is at its best in green leaves. So the moment you have yellow leaves and they are curled, meaning it has a reduced size for photosynthesis to take place, you have minimum photosynthesis taking place. Meaning your growth is hindered. The growth of the plant is hindered. So the growth of the plant actually is reduced, leading to that instance I told you of stunted growth. Yes, that is what you get. You get stunted growth, and then because photosynthesis isn't taking place as it should be, if you are to produce fruits, the fruits produced are less. Yes, so everything about your production is tampered with. From having stunted growth in your crops, your leaves turning yellow. Who actually wants a field full of tomatoes with yellow leaves? That is not even normal. It is not what we desire in our farms. So you have less fruits, you have stunted growth, your field doesn't even look okay. But as always, there is always a way to control these particular disease. So Sarah can put the image up for you and you can have a look. Let me see. Yes, you can have a look at what Sarah is putting up for you so that you can be able to identify this particular disease and what it looks like. We've said it is spread by whiteflies, but I told you our breeders top notch, been doing amazing things, and that means we have resistant varieties. The resistant varieties are several of them actually. I don't know all of their names, but I'll just have a look and tell you. We have Tengeru 97. You can plant Tengeru 97. So some of them are resistant, others are tolerant to the disease, meaning you have no issue about your production. Your production will not be affected in case of this disease coming into your field. So we have the Tengeru 97, We have the Amaretto variety. We have Peto 86. We have Fiona F1, Palina, Denise, and the Rover varieties. All these varieties are resistant to this disease. So, if you know you tend to have a lot of white flies in your farm, just and you want to get rid of this disease, you'd rather use these particular varieties that are resistant to them. But we have other varieties that we've actually been warned that you shouldn't plant because they have very high chances of getting this disease. Don't forget the disease we are talking about. It is the tomato yellow leaf curl virus. The Roma variety and the Maglobe variety are victims of this disease. They tend to get this disease a lot. Mhm. So if you can, avoid them if you don't want an issue with the white flies. Do you remember yesterday I told you something about the white flies being in the soil and always getting into your plant? So you can actually maneuver around with it. Cover your seed bed. If you can use mulch, the better. Because the moment you apply mulch on your farm, the white flies are not able to access the plant. They remain in the soil. They can't get to the plant surface. Okay? If possible, cover your plants. And then we have, you can actually always control it by using the yellow traps, the sticky traps, that you put up in your farm, and then the white flies are attracted to them and then they're trapped over there. It helps in controlling the white flies you have in your farm. And since the white flies actually cause this disease, you can actually control them by using the yellow traps to control the disease. And as I've always said, weeds tend to keep these pests in our farm. Have a very clean field. Have a very clean field, meaning you should not be having weeds in your farm. If you really want your farm to be okay and you'd not to be having cases of white flies infesting in your crops, get rid of the weeds in your farm. And if you find a crop that is highly infested by this particular disease and the particular pests we are talking about, you remove it from your farm. Kama kawaida, just get rid of it and then you'll be good to go. Remove it from your farm, destroy it, and you are good to go. So I want us to go on a break. I told you, I'm just giving you little bits of information. I don't want to give you a large chunk of information that really you can't understand, that will confuse you, that is too much for you to be taking up in a single day. So we will be coming back to look at our last disease for today. So our last disease for today is bacterial spot and speck. We'll be looking at that when we come from the break. But a quick reminder of the of our quote today. Yes, a quick reminder of our quote today. And since I just declared myself the positive vibes auntie, Aya, in a feel poor, by the way. I became an aunt at a very young age. I think I started becoming an aunt, like officially in our family, at around 8 years. So if I call myself auntie, it is legit. No one can actually argue about that. So yes, so the positive vibes auntie today says, our quote today is try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. Try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. Just have that in mind. It's on a Friday. It is Gratitude Friday. You can as well tell me what you're grateful for this week. You can as well tell me what has been your biggest lesson of this week. I'll be telling you what my biggest lesson has been this week, what I am very grateful for this week, even as we'll be wrapping up the show. We'll take a short break. Just don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a few.
Drip irrigation is a type of micro-irrigation system, or sometimes called trickle irrigation, that has potential to save water and nutrients by allowing water to drip slowly to the roots of plants, either from above the soil surface or buried below the surface from a system of small diameter plastic pipes fitted with outlets called emitters or drippers. The emitters slowly drip water into the soil at the root zone, therefore moisture levels are kept at optimum range, thus improving plant productivity. You can grow different crops using drip irrigation, be it tomatoes, spinach, skuma wiki, beetroots, celery, and many more crops will thrive using drip irrigation method. Drip irrigation is especially beneficial as it provides better plant health, less waste, reduced risk of diseases, money saving, weed control, and saves time. Drip irrigation is the most efficient water and nutrient delivery system for growing crops. Beetroot is a highly nutritious root vegetable. The beetroot is the top proportion of a beet plant. It is one of the many varieties of the genus Beta vulgaris, all of which are mostly grown for their edible taproots and leaves. Beetroot is a root crop that takes approximately 3 to 4 months to mature. Beetroot is a fairly easy crop to grow as long as the soil is well cultivated prior to planting. Beetroots do not enjoy wet, boggy or shady soils. Beetroot can be sown in trays and transplanted when the seedlings have 2 true leaves. Plant in full sun, space seedlings 10 to 15 centimeters apart, and rows 20 centimeters to 30 centimeters apart so they have room to grow. Beetroots are also ideal for containers or raised beds. Beetroots will happily thrive in small areas as long as there is at least 20 centimeters depth of soil. Beetroot has been used not only for food but also for treatment for numerous conditions.
A very good morning to you. Welcome back again to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Lillian Thomas. We've been having a wonderful discussion concerning tomato farming since Wednesday. And today we've been talking about diseases in tomato farming, and that has been our discussion for today. But before we get back into our discussion, can we just start wherever we always start each single day? Just as a reminder as we get into our discussion. So, our quote today says, try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. Try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. That's our quote today. And as you know, on Fridays, right here on the Breakfast Show, it is usually Gratitude Friday. I'll be telling you what I am most grateful for on this particular week. And I'll also, today I just felt like I should tell you what my biggest lesson has been this week. I think you ought to know that. So try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud is our quote today. I'll be telling you my greatest lesson this week. I'll be telling you what I'm most grateful for this week, just as we wrap up the show. Today, we've been looking at the diseases that affect tomato farming in Kenya. Yesterday, we covered something on pests and diseases, pests in tomato farming in Kenya. And on Wednesday, we actually did something about tomato farming. So it was more of the production, the management, what you need to do as you are getting into tomato farming. But today we got into the diseases. When we started the show, we've talked about certain diseases. We've talked about dumping off, we've talked about early blight, we've talked about the tomato spotted wilt virus. We've also talked about the tomato yellow curl virus, okay? And in these, we've realized that most of these diseases are actually caused by some of the pests we covered yesterday. So if you missed our show yesterday, you can just go back and watch whatever we had for yesterday on our show. It was quite interesting. You can just have a look and maybe it will give you a background check of whatever we are discussing about today. So I want us to get back into our discussion. We wanted to do something about fusarium wilt. We want to look at something about fusarium wilt, and we will just be wrapping up the show with this particular disease. And then next week we have a bunch of other diseases that we will be looking at. So next week we will be looking at just several of them. So we have the bacterial spot and speck, we have anthracnose, we have bacterial wilts, we have powdery mildew, blossom end rot, and the bacterial canker and the tomato mosaic virus. So we'll be looking at that on Monday. So today we'll just wrap up our discussion right here at the fusarium wilt virus. I don't want us to have too much information that won't be very informative, won't help you in any way. You'd rather have small bits of information that you can really digest. So, the Fusarium wilt virus. Do you remember yesterday when we were talking about the pests we have in the soil? And you remember we talked about the root knot nematodes? And we told you what it does to the soil and how it causes the swelling of the root nodes and stuff, right? So today we are talking about the Fusarium wilt virus, which is a very common disease and is caused by soil pathogens. It's caused by actually diseases we have in the soil. So the disease comes as a result of a disease you have in the soil. If you remember very well on Wednesday, I had a discussion and I talked about doing soil testing for you to determine the pH in the soil, the amount, the nutrients you have in the soil, the nutrients you are lacking in the soil, and in case of any soil-borne disease that you might be having in your soil. That's what we did on Wednesday. So the fusarium wilt is caused by the pathogens we have in our soil. Pathogens are any organisms that cause diseases. So that is pretty straightforward. If you can't remember the name pathogens, just understand we have organisms in the soil that cause this particular disease. So this disease actually gets into the plant via the root system. So it's either gets via the root tip, like you see, like more of how the roots absorb nutrients, that's how it gets into the soil. Or rather, if you have a wound in the root system, or the root system is a little bit damaged, the disease gets in via that particular wound. And this disease, it affects the crop such that it affects the transport system. And if you did something in biology, especially in high school, but which is not very necessary, I'll just explain it to you. The transport system goes from the roots upwards. So all through the stem, all through the branches, as it gets to the terminal points, which are the leaves. So the transport system works all over through the stem. And this particular disease actually grows in the transport system. So it is absorbed through the roots, via the roots, and then it grows up via the transport system. So, meaning your stem is infected, hadiju, until it gets to the leaf point. And this particular disease, if you cut your stem, if if your soil is infected and it infects your crop, if you cut your stem, you find your stem to be having a red or a brown appearance. It has a red or a brown color. Instead of the normal green stem, you find that inside actually your stem looks red or it looks brown. It is fusarium wilt. Wilt meaning it causes the plant to wilt, like the plant just suddenly dies. The plant dies and it cannot reproduce, it cannot do anything. That is what we mean by wilting. But this particular disease actually, because it affects the transport system, the moment you affect the transport system, it means the leaves cannot actually get the water it needs. It cannot absorb the nutrients they need because if the transport system is infected, the water and the nutrients can't go up. If they can't go up, your plant cannot survive without the nutrients it needs or without the water it needs. So it is bound to die. It is bound to wilt and end its life at that particular point. And because the leaves never get water, they never get nutrients. At the same time, they can't be able to do photosynthesis. So the leaves tend to turn yellow. There is a difference. I know I am talking about Fusarium wilt. I'll be talking about another wilt disease on Monday, and there's a difference. In Fusarium wilt, you find that the leaves actually turn yellow. And then this other wilt disease that I'll be talking about on Monday, you find your crop wilting while it's still green. It actually doesn't even change. It doesn't become yellow. No, you don't, like, you just don't see it coming. You just find your crop wilting. But this particular one, the disease tends to turn the leaves to yellow and then they wilt and die, and that's the end of your crop. But we've said there's always a way to resist the disease. There's always a way to control the disease. We have varieties that you can grow that are actually resistant to this particular disease. So if your soil is infected and you still want to grow tomatoes, you can actually still do that because you have varieties that can actually grow and produce even with these pathogens in your soil. And some of these varieties right here in Kenya are Fortune Maker, Rio Grande, Tengeru 97, and Roma VFN. So if you really need to know that, you can just use these particular varieties to grow if you have this particular disease in your soil and you don't want it affecting your crops and you still want to do tomato farming, so you'd rather use the resistant varieties. And I will mention them again: Fortune Maker, Rio Grande, Tengeru 97, Roma VFN. They are resistant to Fusarium wilt because it is a pathogen in the soil that causes this disease. Crop rotation is important. And I told you when we started talking about tomato farming, you find most of the pests and diseases that affect the crops in the family that tomatoes belong to will not affect crops in another family. So if I find I have been planting my tomatoes here and I have this particular disease in my soil, I can always rotate the crops. I can plant cereals, I can plant vegetables such as kales, spinach, cabbage, anything in the brassica family, or rather, I can plant legumes. And if I do that for the next 5 to 7 years, which is the recommended time for crop rotation, especially for this particular disease. So you crop rotate for 5 to 7 years. The crop cycle, the pest cycle of this disease is actually, the disease cycle is interfered with because they really don't have a plant hosting them. They don't have a plant hosting them. So you get the disease is interfered with and it kind of reduces in your farm. But as well, since the pathogens are in your soil, you can always try controlling them by heating your soil. Scientifically, they call it solarization, but that is too hard word to use. So, heating your soil. You can heat your soil like you farm, like you till your land, plow your land, and then cover it with black mulch. You know what black does? Black actually absorbs a lot of heat. If you cover your soil for quite a period of time, like several weeks, you tend to destroy these pathogens in your soil. And when I started, I said this particular soil can always get into your farm either by the root, like it's absorbed by the plant, either by the root tip, or if you have a wound in your roots. Make sure whenever you are doing any management practice, you don't damage your roots or damage your plants in your activities because you provide an entry point for some of these diseases and some of these pests. So be very careful when you are managing your plants in the field. Make sure you don't cause harm, you don't damage them, you don't cause injuries, you don't provide entry points for some of these pests and some of these diseases. And you might find because these particular pathogens are in a certain point of your field, and at a certain point of your field, you do not have them. So if you come from your field, make sure you are always cleaning your farm equipment and tools. Okay? Yes. And there's a particular thing that I think you need to know because it has been found that this disease is less in normal temperatures. Normal temperatures in the soil, no, actually, the normal pH in the soil is regarded as 6.5 to 7. That is like the neutral pH. This disease is lower in neutral pH. So a pH of 6.5 to 7, it tends to be high in very high pH, and it tends to be low to be high in very low pH. Okay? So if you can, with the help of maybe the expert you're working, more so a soil scientist who came to your farm and did a soil test and determined your pH. If he finds your pH to be higher or to be lower than 6.5 to 7, he can always advise you on the fertilizers to apply to get your pH at 6.5 to 7. And remember that pH is actually conducive to be growing tomatoes. We said that the pH needed to grow tomatoes is 5.5 to 7.5. So 6.5 to 7 would still be okay. So you'd rather adjust your pH to 6.5 to 7 in order to control that fusarium wilt. This is where I am wrapping up my discussion today. I just don't want to give you any more information for today. So I'll be wrapping up my discussion at this particular point today. I realized if I keep talking, I'll be giving you too much information that might not be helpful for you, that you might not digest as well, that you might not understand. But Sarah, kindly, before I finish, you can just put up the image concerning fusarium wilts. We just have one last look as we finish up. So we'll start from where we started the show. Sarah will be putting up the images for you so that you can have a clear picture of what we've been discussing about. Our discussion today, we started by talking about this particular disease. Our first disease was damping off. Sarah is putting up an image for you. So the first disease was damping off. We've covered that. If you hadn't started watching the show by the time we started, make sure you go back and watch what we discussed about damping off. The second disease we talked about was early blight. I know Sarah is putting up that. Okay, so the second disease was early blight. The third disease we talked about was tomato spotted wilt virus. Aha, you've had a good look. So the next disease we talked about was the tomato yellow leaf curl virus that is actually spread by whiteflies. The tomato yellow leaf curl virus spread by whiteflies. And then the last disease I've just covered is the fusarium wilt. Okay, now you've seen all the images about the diseases we've talked about. On Monday, we will be talking about bacterial spot and speck. We will also be talking about anthracnose, about bacterial wilt, about powdery mildew, blossom end rot, late blight, bacterial canker, and tomato mosaic virus. So we'll be covering the rest of the diseases on Monday just to ensure that you have all the information about these diseases. So first things first, I want to give you the COVID updates before we wrap up the show. So right here at Kenya, the COVID updates as at yesterday, we've been having COVID for more than a whole year since it came to Kenya last year. And the numbers we are having right here as at yesterday we had the positive cases were 904 out of a sample size of 5,673 cases. And the positivity rate is at 15.9%. The recoveries are at 88%. And then we have the deaths at 20. The recoveries are 88, the deaths are 20, the positive cases are 904 out of a sample size of 5,673. The positivity rate is at 15.9%. Oh yeah, wadau ni weekend. By the way, ni weekend. And leo ni Friday. There is someone aja leo nikishuka huko chini ananiambia ni furahi day, ni siku ya kupiga sherehe. It is on a Friday, anapiga sherehe Friday. Vibaya sana by the way. But as we are getting to the weekend, we are going out here. Remember, COVID is still here with us. And if you are careful, there's a point we had gotten to around 9% of positivity rate. We are back to 15%. 15.9 actually, which is quite high. That is almost 16%. We are back to where we started before we actually put a lockdown in these 5 counties: Kajiado, Machakos, Nairobi, Nakuru, and Kiambu. We are almost back to where we started. The positivity rate is still high, meaning either we are being careless, we are not putting the precautionary measures that have been put up by our government. As we are getting into the weekend, make sure you are putting on your mask whenever you are in public. Your mask should cover your mouth and nose, okay? And make sure that you are washing your hands regularly, or rather sanitizing. And most of all, keep social distance. Muhimu hata kwa mat, by the way, for people who are using PSVs, make sure you are keeping social distance. Very important. Na watu wa kupiga sherehe, if you can get your drink, enda nayo kwa nyumba, piga sherehe kwa nyumba. It is okay. It is good enough. Yes, be very careful. Be very careful when you are going out for the weekend. Na kama hauna biashara ya kuzunguka huku nje, you can always stay indoors. And pia tusiende kusalimia watu nyumbani, people in our country, And you see, our old parents in our country have a very low immunity. The moment you're going there and maybe you're infected, you'll be spreading the disease. Let's just not do that. Your personal initiative, my personal initiative, it becomes a joint effort. We help flatten the curve. It is very important. We need people in these other industries to go back to work, especially people in hospitality, entertainment, tourism industry. We need them to go back to work. So, tusaidiane flatten hii curve. And as I said, it is Gratitude Friday. It is Gratitude Friday right here. What I am most grateful for this week, and what lessons have I learned this week? My lesson this week has been breathe, breathe before reacting. Like always breathe before reacting. Before you make a reaction out of anything, just breathe. Take your time. I had an instance, I think someone overstepped on me a little bit. And you see, when someone oversteps on you, you are very bound to lash out, get so angry, say a lot of mean things and stuff. But at some point, you actually realize you never know why this person is acting the way they are acting. Maybe they are going through a phase that they really are finding a way to channel it out. So someone has overstepped on me at some point this week. And as I sat there listening to them talk, I was like, I really don't want to get into this. I really don't want to react to this. If I do, I might say very mean things that might make the situation worse. And I chose to keep quiet. Later on, I figured out this particular person was having some few issues alikuwa na deal nazo, few issues they were dealing with, and they were really affecting them mentally and how they were associating with people and how they were relating with people. Not take a situation whereby I would have lashed out or said whatever I had to say and actually made the situation worse. And they got more angrier and the situation could not be salvaged. So sometimes you just have to breathe, breathe before reacting. Don't be in a rush to lash out in anger, say some mean comments. It is not worth it. Sometimes just breathe. It is very important. Breathe before reacting. What am I grateful for this week? This week, I am grateful for my capability to be able to learn. I am a very fast learner. I just realized it this week. I am grateful for the capability that I have, that I can be able to learn things in a very fast way. If you just teach me something, I am very fast at learning that. And I am very open minded to always learning something new. So you are willing to teach me something that I have no idea about. I am great at that. I will just learn it. I will do it just as you need it to be done. So, whatever I am grateful for this week is my capability to learn things very fast. I realize that most people, it's not everyone who can learn things a little bit as fast as I can, or maybe at the pace at which I can. Actually, not everyone is always open to learning new things. So, that is one thing I am grateful for this week. So it is the weekend. We are going out, and I want to end the show right here. But I'll be here again on Monday morning on the Breakfast Show, and we'll still be continuing our discussion on diseases affecting tomato farming. That's what we'll be covering on Monday. If you have any questions, you have any comments you'd like, please share them on our page on Facebook. We are at a farmers. On YouTube, we are at a farmers media. One last thing as I wrap up the show. The quote today was saying, the quote today was saying, try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. Try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. What does a rainbow do? A rainbow is very bright. A rainbow is full of colors. A rainbow is full of colors. It is very bright. And then the clouds, the moment you see clouds, clouds in general life are interpreted as a sad situation, a gloomy situation. Okay, today is saying try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. This sad person, this gloomy person, this person having a rough day. Can you try to brighten up the colors of this person? Try to brighten up the mood of this person. That's what a rainbow does. A rainbow is very, 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 very bright. And if you can be a rainbow in someone's cloud today, it will be a good thing, especially even more so for the weekend as we are going on the weekend. And as I always wrap up, be kind, be kind. You never know what people are dealing with out here. Be kind, be nice to people, be very kind. Say kind words, don't be mean to people, be kind to people. That is my parting shot for today. Conrad Kibe will be coming in for the Farm Drive show at 3 p.m. And if you missed any of our shows, we have them uploaded on Facebook at our farmers, on YouTube at our farmers media. It is the weekend. Make sure you watch any show that you missed during the week. And if you have any comments, any questions, you can always post them on our page. We'll be looking at them and then we'll be giving you feedback before next week. If you want any topics covered, please let us know. We'll be doing that for you right here at our farmers. Until Monday morning, again for the breakfast show, it is a goodbye from me. Have a nice weekend.